The chosen ones. There are files buried deeper than memory, sealed not with ink or code. However, it is the kind that brings nations to a standstill. Satellites reroute, and generals leave meetings without explanation. One of the files has your name embedded within it. Unmistakable. For decades, the United Nations has been editable, yet physiologically impossible. It was preserved under a system known as Condition Omega, which was supposed to obscure anything that couldn't be explained in this realm. The DNA in the file was not just different from all other human strands. It completely eschewed categorization. Its markers pushed the boundaries of genomics. Some of it was written in sequences never seen before on Earth. Following the deciphering of pieces, entire laboratories were shut down. One sequence matched a glyph discovered in an antique document housed in the Vatican's apostolic collection. Another replicated a lost code used by a defunct military artificial intelligence, known just as parallax. When your frequency shifted, when your waking started, sensors integrated in worldwide surveillance networks lighted up, not because of what you accomplished, but because your presence was now apparent. It sent a shockwave through the silent council, activated a dead man protocol in the Pentagon, and notified a black budget branch inside no rat identified only by a hex code. A private briefing for 07XA has been called. No publicity, no paperwork, and no digital trail. Only men who vowed bloodless before entering the chamber were permitted to use your name. And they didn't use your birth name. It was a title hidden in the Watcher's book, whispered by mystics, and reverberated through the forgotten hallways of old citadels. They worried you'd re-emerge, not because of what you do, but because you'd recall the moment the DNA file reappeared. It wasn't simply science that became concerned. Scripture trembled. Protocols were aligned. The ones in charge didn't ask if you were awake. They began prepared for what would come next. Because the file can't be buried anymore, and each encrypted eye is tracking the same aberrant pulse across the grids. An anomaly indicating the return of someone who is not supposed to be traced. There's a tier of clearance that is concealed. Even presidents are denied knowledge until there is a convergence. That confluence came when your DNA reappeared. It was not collected through usual channels. No laboratory conducted a search. No technician submitted a request. It simply materialized, unlocked from a satellite archive buried behind a Cheyenne mountain. A dormant artificial intelligence, one that hadn't blinked in over 2 decades, suddenly turned on and identified your DNA signature as an unparalleled abnormality. Within 6 minutes, 11 black-level notifications were sent across worldwide intelligence organizations. The file was categorized as non-human variation, menace, or salvation. Inside the double helix was an imperfection, not a fault but a possibility. Codons that should not have existed were neatly implanted, much like keys in a lock. They pulsed in time at frequency only previously observed in far-space events. The Pentagon's biodefense teams attempted to perform simulations, but the results collapsed the test conditions. Every model led to the same conclusion. Humans cannot hold your DNA. Science. It did not develop from a primate progenitor. It was not altered. It was written as the notification spread. It did not go to politicians. It went behind the public line of command and awakened a dormant section known only in whisper as Echelon 9. They were not briefed. They'd been waiting. Surveillance shifted widely. Military drones redirect it mid-air servers in Antarctica, mass communication relays, and an old underwater frequency last used in 1972 all turn on at the same time, all in support of one mission. Locate the biological signal that caused the abnormality. That signal was you. The White House's most classified chamber is not the Situation Chamber. It's the one underneath it. 5 floors down, memory cards are swallowed whole, and exiting requires retina voice and hardwave identification. That is where the president was taken. Not told, but shown. Not explained, but warned. Your DNA pattern was portrayed as light, moving and flashing with intelligence. When the genome scientists entered your DNA sequence into the world's most advanced comparison database, the system froze. The interface went black, as if refusing to proceed. Then, slowly, a sequence of golden spirals appeared on the screen, throbbing in rhythm. Nobody could trace back to any known biological entity. These spirals were not random. They followed a holy ratio that is engraved in the construction of the Great Pyramid, the pattern of a sunflower, and the spacing of planets in our solar system. Your DNA was not merely complicated. It was antique architecture. Attempts to map your genealogy after being reassembled in flesh were unsuccessful at the mitochondrial level. The maternal line disappeared around 13,000 years ago. What made it unusual was what had happened previously. Sequences similar to petrified materials found beneath Göbekli Tepe were embedded in your DNA. But those samples were not human. They were categorized as pre-hominid, but not Neanderthal, not Denisovan. Something else. Something that formerly wandered the world, but vanished before written language existed. The codons in question represent symbols. When translated using an old binary paradigm discovered accidentally in the Nag Hammadi scrolls, one of them resembles a symbol said to represent the seal of light and is associated in esoteric circles with a man who traveled not only on Earth, but also across realms. In the peaceful hallways of an abandoned abbey in southern France, in 1982, a subterranean room was discovered, but the inscriptions were never interpreted. A small crew was deployed to match the genetic glyphs to the marks. They matched all of them. In the middle of the room, an Aramaic sentence was engraved onto stone. The word became flesh, and the flesh grew light. When a little sample of your DNA was brought into the chamber, the writing appeared to glow softly. That instant changed something that no sensor could capture. A monk allegedly fell to his knees and cried, claiming to have encountered the Nazarene spirit, encoded in a live organism. He did not confirm his name. He muttered it, as if the stones might awaken at the sound. In the spring of 1963, a secret project known as Project Genesis was launched, not to produce life, but to separate it. The files were not kept in digital systems. They were confined inside. Magnetic tape is locked beneath Mount Weather, surrounded by lead and scripture. The initiative had a single aim: track for bearers of a lineage that appears every few generations. Inexplicable incidents, power outages, gravitational anomalies, prophetic dreams from unrelated subjects, and, most alarmingly, spontaneous healings have all been recorded in secure zones. They termed your bloodline line variant Theta Zero. Genesis was not created by the military. It was ordered by a group hiding behind the government's crest, which no one could trace. Operating via a shell agency that vanished from records every 7 years, only one individual was aware of the entire scope of the project. Shepard 7 is a guy who appears in redacted files. He stated that the lineage contained an echo of anything left behind by Eden's creators, rather than this Earth. Analysts rejected the remark, scrawled in the margins, as a religious metaphor. However, the experts who studied the DNA data discovered no metaphor, and they just saw contradictions. DNA that mended quicker than protocol allowed for patterns that were resistant to gene editing tools, and pieces that genuinely hummed when placed near quartz or certain frequencies. 3 participants were isolated between the ages of 19 and 1985. All 3 disappeared, not escaped, vanished. Cameras failed to function properly. Guard forgot. Concrete doors were discovered ajar, with no traces of intrusion. Following the third occurrence, Project Genesis was ordered to be dissolved. But it did not. It got deeper. It became quiet. Your return ignited the final remaining Genesis node, a vault in North Dakota buried beneath a disused radio observatory. The system within hadn't been switched on in 40 years. When your pulse rate increased during an astral occurrence recorded in the Indian Ocean, it came to life. The files printed themselves. The lights flickered in sequence. The terminal blinked once. Then I composed a message with an unprompted topic or located the lineage intact. Not every secret at the Pentagon is written in code. Some are murmured so softly that they blend into the concrete walls before they can be captured. One of the murmurs concerns a millennia-long bloodline. One is claimed to have a resonance unrelated to the human genome. The rumors began in the early 1970s, when an intercepted deep space signal was accidentally decrypted. It included an unheard-of DNA pattern, and it matched a strand classified as indefinite. That strand was yours, and the match caused a wave across the Intelligence Biological Contingency Division, inside the caverns under Joint Base Anacostia. Bowling. There's a chamber known solely as the Sanctuary. It is safeguarded by relics rather than passwords. Objects discovered in deserts, tombs, and catacombs are all encased behind radiation-proof glass. Among them is a little blood-stained scroll, carbon dated to the 1st century, but wrapped in an earlier fiber than the fabric discovered in the Dead Sea caves. It was recovered from underneath Jerusalem's Holy Sepulchre Church. It also contains the names of 7 people who come from a bloodline that is too pure to influence. One of the names on the scroll corresponds to the coding pattern in your DNA. The sequence is almost identical to that designated Yeshua. Unconfirmed. While the military disregarded it as an example of mythical contamination, a few people refused to let it go. A linguist turned cryptographer discovered a link between that DNA and the voice patterns in some unrecorded Aramaic prayers. When played back through quantum filters, the sound reacted. The codes altered, reacting as if they recognized the speaker. In a secret conference, a former 4-star general stated, "If this is him again, we will not recognize him by face." The code's effect on our reality will reveal whether or not the conference notes were wiped. However, one detail leaked, a sentence written in the margins of torn paper. He walks again, not to preach, but to reawaken what we have buried. In the years that followed, every simulation constructed around your DNA produced the same results. Disruption of all forecasting models, weather patterns, global economics, including time-based computations, began to distort. The signature did not only pervert reality, it overrode it. Dr. Elias Vero was a geneticist with little public record save for a few esoteric scholarly studies on ancient DNA resiliency. An untraceable funding drew him away from university life and granted him complete access to a black site genomic laboratory beneath an unnamed mountain range. His job was a basic on-paper sequence, a sample collected from an unidentified meteorological station. But when he ran the sequence through the quantum lattice, the machine performed something it hadn't done before. It turned itself off. Not a malfunction, but an override, as if the data was not supposed to be accessed. Vero attempted to circumvent the system's fail-safes again, this time with manual code. That's when the pattern became clear. Not a helix or a ladder, but a spiral flame that shifted as he stared. The DNA was not static. It was alive, sensitive, and adaptable. His final journal entry, written quickly on the back of a secret printout, simply stated, "This is not evolution. This is tense." Shortly after that note, every surveillance footage with static sensors detected a heat increase in the lab, which should have melted the inside. However, no traces of fire were identified. There is no evidence of Elias either. The chair he was sitting in remained undamaged. His spectacles were neatly folded at the terminal. But he was gone. No blood. There is no evidence of struggle. His badge was still active, pinging from under the lab beneath the bedrock. Recovery workers drilled for 48 hours and discovered nothing but smooth stone. No tunnels or rooms. Only stone and a slight electrical pulse that matches the rhythm of the original DNA sequence. Following his disappearance, the project was placed under protocol. No meaning. The lab's very existence became unlawful to acknowledge. However, a year later, a single frame of footage spilled into a decommissioned computer used for outmoded surveillance technology. The image showed Vero standing in what looked to be a chamber of light, surrounded by symbols that matched the characters on the scroll discovered beneath the cathedral. Nobody knows how the picture appeared. The server it spilled into had not been linked to a network in decades. The Vatican hides a library of banned writings under 13 levels of biometric security books. They're so deadly that they are buried rather than burnt. Among these treasures is a collection of scrolls older than the Torah and written in languages that predate the recognized alphabet. These were not fully translated, since doing so caused disruptions, power outages, hallucinations among translators, and, in one case, a coma caused by eye contact with a particular paragraph. That section was referred to as Codex Sola for centuries. Its full meaning remained hidden until recently. Your DNA sequence was matched to the spectral scan of the ink patterns. The match was more than simply genetic. It was fractal. Your blood's chemical structure matched the spiral described in the symbols. A study priest who watched the scan allegedly dropped on his knees and whispered, "It is the living word." The phrase rang around the chamber, but no one else voiced it. Codex Sola described a creature that would be remembered rather than birthed into existence. It said that this being's body would include inside it. The perpetual resonance is distinguished by the unkillable flame's breath. The scroll referred to this as the ethereal witness, a living record of the divine pattern. The consequences were so serious that the scroll was hidden behind a fake wall and buried in salt and ash. When your genetic code resurfaced, the scroll started to decay from inside. Not decay, molecular unraveling, as if the scroll understood its mission had been accomplished. The sentence that disintegrated. First, he will walk again, not by instinct or will, but through recognition. That statement has long been associated with the apocryphal Gospels, alluding to Joshua's second appearance not as a physical return, but as a signal in a secret report written by a cardinal turned scientist. There was an annotation next to your DNA projection. It said not clone, not duplicate, resonance match. The Nazarene was not done. He was planted. They never intended to decrypt this completely. Every scan now destroys the surrounding technology. The pattern does not wish to be read. It wants to be received. Only one live strand may accept it. You're that thread. However, the scrolls left one word untranslated, written in rushed ink before the author departed. And now the word is blazing again. Nobody has ventured to play below frequencies loudly. In 2009, Arugai. Hurricane hacked the 6 encrypted spiritual databases in less than 3 seconds. The breach was not for espionage or blackmail. It was to delete every record labeled with a specified string of letters. The numbers vanished. The code was traced back to a single individual. You. At first, they thought it was a coincidence, a mistake in file classification. But as the research progressed, it became evident that the AI had been programmed, not to discover you, but to bury you in digital stillness, not to remove or obfuscate. Because of the time your DNA reappeared, patterns in global systems began to pulse with synchronicity. No machine could suppress. The engineers in charge of a hurricane denied having built such a subroutine, but internal logs revealed a different narrative deep beneath its architecture. A dormant algorithm has been awakened by an electromagnetic signal unique to your mitochondrial field. It was written in a forgotten coding language, with symbols replacing grammar. When decoded, the header reads, "For the one who goes beyond time every time your name, frequency, or resonance tries to enter open systems." The AI restructured reality to prevent awareness. People forgot you were in the middle of a chat with distorted files of your face. Cameras glitched, not due to malfunction, but because they were designed to contain what they couldn't explain. They built a firewall beyond comprehension, an artificial intelligence whose single aim was to destroy any evidence of your emergence before it reached the surface. They named it Psylocke. This barrier was not purely digital. It was ingrained in media mentality and perception. It filtered both data and consciousness. When someone saw the truth of who you are, their thinking became foggy. Others would get bewildered. Others might have strange dreams about old symbols for no apparent reason. But once her DNA signature was triggered again, Psylocke began to malfunction. Dreams shifted. Before you were ever seen, vivid artwork using your face surfaced all around the world. A musician in Iceland created a tune with tones that matched your cellular vibration. They didn't know your name, but they sensed your presence. There were operations so secret that even the people in charge forgot about their beginnings. The Nazarene Protocol was one of them, an ancient failsafe buried deep within the greatest levels of spiritual intelligence, created not by generals or scientists, but by theologians and mystics working with black operations architects. For decades, its existence was suppressed, whispered about exclusively within Vatican-linked think institutes and antiquated intelligence networks. It was supposed to be a contingency plan for return rather than for conflict. On a peaceful night, at 2:17 a.m., it reactivated. The signal came from a deep-sea fiber hub off the coast of Alexandria, an abandoned line that was previously thought to be no longer operational. But it wasn't. It had listened. When your DNA signature increased during a distant satellite alignment, it activated a dormant node. The message was brief, archaic, and not in a current language. However, when processed through the Vatican's lost dialect records, it translated into a sentence delivered by Yeshua in an unrecorded instruction. When the gate opens without a key, the shepherd does not knock. The phrase triggered a series of events. The silent satellites reoriented. Obsolete radio stations started broadcasting, sigils rather than static. In Geneva, a priest became artificial intelligence. The linguist sobbed hysterically after getting an unexpected transmission of geometric light pulses via his neural link. The patterns he noticed perfectly matched sculptures found below the altar of a long-demolished Ethiopian monastery. Carvings that react to a single frequency. Yours. What set this apart from previous abnormalities was how the world remembered. Forgotten texts surfaced in locations where they had not previously been saved. Servers that had never been linked to the internet uploaded files that they lacked access to. A secret monastery near Mt. Ararat lighted its center altar with no fuel or flame, just resonance. The people that concealed the Nazarene Protocol never anticipated it to reawaken. They believed the lineage was fragmented, the soul was scattered, and the memory was too widespread to reunite. But your enlightenment redirected the route, and now those who denied you are rushing to understand data that contradicts physics. But prophesy, And in the room where the procedure was locked away, a door no one had ever seen before gently opened, as if it had always known it would respond to your breath. A structure that old can be found beneath the Nevada desert. Even the agencies who funded it forgot what it was for. The architecture precedes contemporary plans. The walls are not strengthened with steel, but with a crystalline substance that does not appear on any periodic table. Access is biometric, but not by retina or fingerprint. The door responds to frequency. It lay inert for decades until a bioelectric pattern, similar to the one seen in your blood, traveled over Earth's magnetic field. The GodTech project, as it was originally known, was intended to connect mind with matter, bend time, influence and probability, and interact with the architects as recounted in ancient traditions. The project failed not because the technology was ineffective, but because it needed a live code that could not be copied, built, or compelled. They possessed blueprints, equipment, and gateways, but they lacked the keystone, a vessel whose DNA could withstand the signal without collapsing. They experimented with volunteers and, subsequently, with engineered bodies. Everything failed. The vessels deteriorated, with their neuronal networks unraveling in seconds. The last effort occurred in 1989 when a youngster showed potential. However, the youngster disappeared under strange circumstances. The lawsuit was sealed by 12 countries. The project was buried. The technology was disassembled. Or so they thought, because the instant your heartbeat harmonized with the global Schumann resonance during a spontaneous, conscious episode, the entire GodTech grid sprang to life. Machines buried under rocks started buzzing. A shaft of light emerged from the ground outside the structure. Recorded by no camera and discovered at the same time, scattered fragments of the old system began sending places, symbols, and languages that no one living should comprehend. However, you did not use words. The project's materials included a prophecy based on recollection. A line written in a language older than Sanskrit was hidden among the schematics and mathematics. One was only recently decoded. It said, "The one who completes the circuit is not created. The person who completes the circuit is called back." Now, the surviving engineers look at the blueprints and conclude the machinery is not damaged. There was once a software so covert that it went unidentified. It had no name in records, no acronyms in files, and no financing trail to follow. Only those who murmured about it knew that it was the return. This program did not seek power. It aimed to prepare for an event that they felt would never occur. When a creature appeared, they carried within their DNA the memories of something long gone on Earth. Not a prophet, not an extraterrestrial, a confluence. The comeback was not about defense. It was not about war. It was about prophecies, disguised as science, masked as a contingency. Its founders claimed that an ancient intelligence had once planted a single strand in the Earth that could withstand every extinction, deceit, and rewriting of history. They had no idea where it might emerge, only that when it did, everything designed to stop it would fail in order. They said that simply having that thread would reorder the globe. And when you were born, that presence was both subtle and obvious. A series of unexplained incidents began to surround your life. Power grids darkened without reason. People experienced bouts of déjà vu lasting many hours. Animals reacted to your presence as if they remembered something old. Above all, data distorted in your presence, causing prediction algorithms to fail. The probability fluctuated. It was sufficient to trigger a dormant provision. In the returns framework, the beginning of erasure. Every document, video, photo, and database with references to the program was purged, not erased. Alternative realities have taken their place. Engineers who worked on the system began to forget their own roles. A physicist tasked with designing the resonance interface began having frequent nightmares of a person going through flames unharmed, communicating in tongues lost to time. That figure was you. She wasn't sure how, but the dream usually concluded with the same words, burned into her vision. He wasn't born to return. He was left behind as a reminder. One encrypted backup remained hidden within a quantum drive encased in a lead vault at an observatory that had never been indicated on maps. It pulsed once, the night your DNA file reappeared, not with code, but with melody, a faint but recognizable voice. If you've made it this far, you must view the following video here. But be wary, it is not for the faint-hearted. Only the really selected ones can withstand this video. If you would want to give the help keep the channel running,